Yes, and please turn on your cameras. Thank you. Counselor Lewis.
Present.
Counselor Wong.
Present.
Counselor Nolan.
Present.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Present.
Counselor Gonzalez is going to join us shortly. Counselor Simpson is excused, and Council President Peterson.
Here. Thank you. All right. Georgia, can we play the video for safety for our in-person attendees?
Yes.
Thank you.
If the folks in the back could please play the safety video, that would be wonderful.
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We will move on to public communication. I will now open up public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe the audience or procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
I'm Jason, and I'm an event production manager. Here at the Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, safety is...
Thank you. Okay. If anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a full panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call on your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give us your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. And Council President Peterson, I have not received any in-person testifying cards, and I have no one on Zoom that has raised their hand.
Okay, thanks. And the mics do seem a little hot.
Agreed.
Really, so I don't know if there's a way to turn that down. Like 12 inches away, and it's still really, really loud.
Yes.
All right, with that, we will close public communication on non-agenda items and move on to the consent agenda. There is one item on today's consent agenda, resolution number 24-5432 for the purpose of appointing one new member to the Metro Supportive Housing Service Community Oversight Committee. Do I have a motion for, I'm sorry.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Thank you. It has. Could we just slow down a minute? Just a tad, because it's a resolution, Carrie, in the script under consent agenda. I just want to check with you. Is that correct?
Yes, there is one resolution in the council's consent agenda today that is resolution number 24-5432 for the purpose of appointing the new member to the Support Housing Services Oversight Committee. Not necessary for me to read the title in full, but just because of the confusion, I thought I would.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Lewis called for the motion, and there was a second by Councilor Rosenthal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. All right. The motion passes. Thank you. Ordinances. We have ordinance number 24-1518 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 6.94 acres in Hillsborough on the north side of Northeast Shaft Street at the intersection with Northeast 62nd Avenue. Councilors, as you will recall, the first reading public hearing for this item was our September 12th meeting, and at that time we received no testimony on this matter. We have Glenn Hamburg, our regional planner, here to answer any questions. Councilors, any questions? Seeing no one at the dais or hands raised. Glenn, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe just feel purposeful here right now. I'll just note that we did correct the map. As mentioned last week, there was a minor non-substantive error, but thanks to George's help and the team over in our GIS department, we corrected that error, and that's reflected in the paperwork before you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do I have a motion on ordinance number 24-1518 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 6.94 acres in Hillsborough on the north side of Northeast Shaft Street, at the intersection with Northeast 62nd Avenue?
I move to adopt.
Great. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Rosenthal and seconded by Councilor Nolan. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Rosenthal,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Aye.
Counselor Nolan,
Yes.
Counselor Wong,
Aye.
and Council President Peterson.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to other business. Good morning, everyone. We are joined today by housing staff who will share new data from the Q4 Supportive Housing Services reports from each of the 3 counties. Metro's primary role in SHS implementation is to provide accountability and oversight of tax revenue and progress towards commitments made to the voters, and to convene and coordinate long-term regional solutions. Staff regularly present county implementation processes and challenges to council and are coming today to present on the fiscal year 24 Q4 reports. In Q4 year to date, data provides a preliminary overview for the entire program. Here today, we have 2 staff folks. We have Yasina Delgado, Supportive Housing Services Manager, and Rachel Limbo. No? Yeah, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Hi. Planning, Development, and Research, and Housing and Finance Managers. The floor is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this update today. My name is Yesenia Delgado. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the SHS manager here at Metro. And I'm joined by Rachel Limbo, who's our finance manager. So we're really excited today to be bringing you all an update on Q4 progress and the transformative work happening at Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington County. Today's presentation will be focused on Q4 reports, and these reports do provide us preliminary data in terms of the year-round numbers for fiscal year 24. However, we won't have those final numbers confirmed until the annual report that is due October 31st of later this year, and we are planning to come back later this fall to give you all an update in terms of those annual reports with a deeper dive into analysis and programming work that occurred. With that, can we go to the next slide? So in today's presentation, I'll be providing really a regional progress update in terms of where we're at with our goals, provide county by county performance and highlights, and then Rachel will be providing a financial update, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. Next slide, please. So this slide here shows the regional progress for the last 3 years of SHS programming. As you all know, we have these 2 main 10-year regional goals that we set forth at the inception of the program, which include connecting at least 5,000 households experiencing homelessness to permanent supportive housing, and to stabilize at least 10,000 households at risk or experiencing homelessness into permanent housing. So here you see that for permanent supportive housing, we've placed 4,256 households, so really close to that goal that we set forth. For rapid rehousing, we've placed 2,038 households. Eviction prevention, over 15,000 households have been served with these dollars since the beginning of SHS, and we've supported over 1,800 shelter units. In this next slide that you'll see, this is more specific to this fiscal year. So you'll see the regional progress to the annual work plan goals. The annual work plan goals are goals that the county sets forth at the beginning of each fiscal year. So the different columns that you'll see here are the service category type, the fiscal year 24 goal, the progress for all 4 quarters this fiscal year, and then just the quarter 4 numbers. In the interest of time, I won't read all the numbers and outcomes that you see here, but I would like to just share a couple highlights, which include that quarter 4 has consistently been the quarter that we see an increase in placements and service delivery. This year, the region exceeded goals for all but one of the service areas, which is supportive housing services placements. But the region still came close to reaching that goal with almost over 90% of the way. And even though we didn't reach every single goal this year, we still have seen really incredible improvements that I'll be able to highlight when we get to the county by county performance. Next slide. Tracking populations A and B is a key component of SHS. The Supportive Housing Services Work Plan requires that counties allocate 75% of funds to services for people that are extremely low income, have one or more disabling conditions, and are experiencing or imminent risk of experiencing long-term or frequent episodes of literal homelessness, otherwise known as population A. And that 25% of funds go to people that are experiencing homelessness or have substantial risk of experiencing homelessness, otherwise known as population B. So this slide here kind of rolls up all the service categories for each county, and you see the breakdown of who they've served by population A and B. Across the metro region, 2,046 of the households identified as population A and 4,186 households identified as population B. Next slide, please. So we'll now shift over to county by county updates and performance. So Clackamas County significantly expanded all service areas this fiscal year, exceeding every single annual goal they set this fiscal year. Despite a slow start to their rapid rehousing programming, they exceeded their goal by over 63% this year. Their prevention goal this year was almost double their annual goal, and these placements exceeded last year's placement numbers by over 300%. So kudos to Clackamas County, really incredible work happening there. And in this next slide, you'll see some more program-specific highlights, which include that their Coordinated Housing Access Hotline was recognized with the 2024 Achievement Award from the National Association of Counties. These awards go to local governments for innovative programming, which are judged on innovation and creativity, measurable results and effectiveness, and being able to include participation from local citizens. So really awesome that they were able to get this award. Clackamas County also in quarter 4 opened their first ever culturally specific shelter that serves 56 households a year. This was in partnership with NAIA, providing really intentional culturally specific services at this shelter, along with ongoing housing placement services. Each of these rooms that they opened here, each family has their own room and includes a kitchenette and a bathroom for these households. So really intentional shelter facility that they created here. Clackamas County also opened new permanent housing this in quarter 4. You all might know the formal Merrillhurst University campus in Lake Oswego. That was transitioned into the Mercy Me Green community that includes affordable 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments here. And some of the units that are identified here will be allocated to people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. So overall, really, really incredible quarter for Clackamas County. Shifting over to Multnomah County, here you see where they landed in terms of their performance. This year, Multnomah County placed over 900 households through rapid rehousing, exceeding their annual goal. These services were delivered equitably, with Black enrollees seeing greater success in housing placements than even non-Hispanic white enrollees. They did fall 44% short of their prevention goal this year, and as you can see here, they were a little under for their permanent supportive housing goal as well. Some specific Multnomah County program highlights in the next slide are that they opened the Hazel Yingley Apartments in Q4. This is a 206 unit affordable housing development in the Creston neighborhood. And it's really an expansion of culturally specific services. So this is in partnership with Home Forward, Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, the Portland Housing Bureau, and the Joint Office. So there are 30 units here for permanent supportive housing that are intended to serve immigrants and refugees. And the SHS funding does not fund the actual affordable housing, brick and stones, but it funds the ongoing wraparound services that these families and households need to stay in housing. Additionally, Multnomah County also received a national award this quarter for their work in serving older adults with disabilities that are experiencing homelessness. So they have a unique team that received this award due to the proactive approach in serving this population and all the intentional wraparound services that they provide to house people and then keep them in their housing. Next slide. Another Multnomah County highlight this quarter is that, as folks here know, Metro had found that Multnomah County had materially deviated from its fiscal year 23 spend down goal in the financial reports. Therefore, Multnomah County is placed on a corrective action plan. The CAP goal was to increase spending in line with their spend down goal. The focus of the CAP was underspent funds from the fiscal year 23 budget. We agreed that the cap would be terminated once the county's spending rate reached 95% in each of the cap categories that we developed, other than in one item that we had previously agreed upon. And we're really excited to share that Multnomah County submitted their final cap report earlier in August, and all the spending requirements were met that we set forth. There were programmatic outcomes associated with 6 out of the cap items and service categories, and 5 out of the 6 goals were met. Multnomah County staff will be joining the upcoming Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee on Monday to do a presentation and walk them through their final results, and then we will be moving forward with terminating this cap. A couple more slides to, of course, just share the incredible work happening at Washington County. So here you'll see their performance and their progress to their year 3 goals. So for Washington County, they have continued to exceed their prevention placements for the second year in a row. Prevention services in Washington County are being led with equity, with Hispanic households representing almost half of all their prevention placements. And the rapid rehousing placements, even though they placed more people than they did last year, they did come in lower than what they were anticipating their goal to be. And then they also were not able to meet their permanent supportive housing placement goal this year. Next slide, please. In Q4, Washington County had some really awesome highlights as well. They rolled out the RLOA only program, which is a rental assistance program for households who only need the housing subsidy, but not the intensive case management. So they, after assessing households, transitioned households into this program to only be providing the housing subsidy. So this is a program that they launched at the beginning of Q4. 64 households were referred, and by the end of the quarter, 6 households were enrolled into this new program. Also in Q4, Washington County launched monitoring for the Supportive Housing Services funded Enhanced Rapid Rehousing Program. So this is a program with rent assistance that assists households in being able to pay their own rent over time. So they launched a monitoring framework in alignment with HUD's Continuum of Care monitoring. They randomly selected folks to be monitored either on site or conducting a desk monitoring, and they were able to really gain really valuable feedback from providers in terms of their monitoring process and tools, and also how to streamline their programming. So kudos to Washington for
for initiating this really important oversight function of monitoring their providers. And with that, I will pass it over to Rachel to provide a financial update.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide. My name is Rachel Lembo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am here today as the PD&R and Housing Finance Manager. So Yesenia just walked you through the great programming that our counties have been doing. Obviously, to do all of that great work, they need to spend a lot of money. And this year, in fiscal year 24, the total county spending was $294 million. Similar to last quarter, we've been seeing growth in county programming and spending. And you can see that in the chart here. This compares last fiscal year to the prior year. So year 2 to year 3, or FY23 to FY24. And you can see each county either doubled or nearly doubled their spending. And for the past few years, as we've been implementing this program, we've been talking about counties ramping up their programs, building this out, expanding their capacity to provide these services. And that's exactly what we're now able to see in the financials. Next slide, please. Due to that increased spending, the carryover amount did not increase significantly in FY24. We've also talked a lot about carryover during the past few years. And as you can see on this chart, the carryover amount increased steadily in years 1 and 2 as the counties were ramping up their programs. However, in year 3, it only increased slightly because the counties spent more. This is what we expected to see. The carryover was built up. Now it's starting to plateau. And what we'll see over the next few years is that this will actually decrease as that carryover is invested. I do want to call out that we had an error on this chart, so you don't see any numbers. But that line, so in year 3, FY24, where it's almost at that line, that's a $400 million line. They're at about $400 million in FY24. Last year, FY23 was about $350 million. Next slide, please. So as I just said, carryover at the end of the year is $394 million. Of this, $88 million is reserved for the tax stabilization and the Regional Investment Fund program. The remaining $306 million can be used by the counties for one-time, limited duration, and pilot program spending. Next slide, please. And some examples of what that one-time limited duration and pilot program spending could be are listed here. Service provider capacity building, expansion of short-term rent assistance, alternative and transitional shelters, and drop-in and resource centers. This is all work that happened in FY24. The county spent just over $100 million of those carryover funds on these programs. These are examples of the type of work we expect that they will continue to do as they spend down that carryover. And it is possible that some of this work that is right now being invested, being identified as a pilot program, could then turn into an ongoing program. But this carryover actually gives them the opportunity to take advantage of one-time investments or try out new pilot programs that, as Yesenia mentioned, sometimes get them national recognition. And I believe next slide concludes our presentation, but Yesenia and I are happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. A lot of good work has happened over the last year. Much appreciated. Counselors, questions? Counselor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing us this quarterly report. I think the numbers overall are very good. The larger context of what the counties are able to accomplish with their other funds that are not SHS is obviously missing. But that being said, could you speak either to someplace in this report or more anecdotally that points to why the PSH goals were missed by 2 out of the 3 counties, and quite significantly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think overall what we're hearing from the counties is that permit supportive housing, there's a couple reasons for those delays. One is the actual construction. Like they are a lot of times leveraging other funding sources to actually build these permit supportive housing units, and there have been just funding overlay delays, construction delays. So that is one of the reasons. Additionally, it also speaks to a lot of times the people being placed in permanent supportive housing, just due to the levels of higher acuity that they have, just take longer to get them, get those relationships going, get them document ready, and then provide those ongoing services to be able to place them in housing. So it is households, like I said, with higher levels of acuity that just need more support, and that a lot of times causes further delays. And they're still working with these households. It might just be that they're not placed into this next fiscal year.
Great, thank you. Just wanted you to say out loud that in order to have PSH, you got to have the H. So thank you. It's going to be on a bumper sticker coming real soon. And Madam President, if I may, Rachel, this is maybe your last one of these. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited that you've got a new opportunity still within the family. But you've been an amazing financial analyst to get us going. And the thing that is the most complicated about this is the money flow. Getting good service workers out on the streets is less complicated than following the money here, which 2 years ago I would have told you was the opposite problem. So I just want to take time to thank you. Big shoes to fill.
To clarify, by staying the family.
Yes. You're not going anywhere.
Another big problem to solve.
Not a problem, an opportunity.
Rachel is named the interim deputy director of the 5.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else with questions? Councilor Wong?
Yep. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the report. It's great to see us trending in a positive direction. My first question is really on the data from Multnomah County, and I noticed that they did a great job of serving population A, but what was different from the other counties were their numbers for serving population B were lower than the other counties, and just proportionally. And I'm wondering, is that because of the funding sources, or is there just less focus on population B in Multnomah County?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And the way we're tracking population A and B is so nuanced, and it's not always really easy to show when you just look at numbers. Because, for example, population B households, a lot of times what's attributed to the service program areas are things like eviction prevention. And that is overall an investment that, even though a lot more households are maybe served in that, because on average it takes maybe $8,000 to stabilize those households, that is going to be a lot less than serving a household with permanent supportive housing services. So even though it might look like for population B, a lot more households are being served, that doesn't mean that that's where the financial breakdown might land in terms of serving population A and B households. So this is a dynamic that came about with the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee. So they actually requested that Metro and the counties work together to identify further methodologies and guidance to understand why these nuances are happening around in serving population A and B. So hopefully in this year's county annual reports, we'll be able to provide a deeper dive in terms of who's being served with population A and B, and that financial breakdown of how much it's costing.
I mean, financials aside, though, it just seemed like I think Multnomah County's total population served was about 2,000, but the other counties combined were higher than that. So I'm wondering, about that discrepancy.
Yeah, I think what's also really unique about Multnomah County is that they do leverage several other funding sources that they have available for their homeless system of care. whereas the other two counties leverage a lot less local funding and federal funding. So when we look at, for example, slide 5 that I showed you all with population A and B, for those two counties, Clackamas and Washington, we're kind of seeing close to their full homeless system of care, whereas Multnomah County, even though numbers might look a bit lower, it doesn't speak to their larger system of care and all the other funding sources that they have available.
Okay, thank you. And then just a follow-up question for Rachel. Actually, for both of you, it's I think somewhat heartening overall to see the increased spending last fiscal year, and I'm wondering if you might be able to give your thoughts on, is that going to be a continuing trend? Is that like, are we seeing that because the infrastructure is now set up so the funding can flow, more effectively and efficiently? Or is that kind of like a blip? Or like, how are you projecting the kind of financial trends in terms of spending?
Sure. What we've heard from the counties is that much of the increase has been as they have been growing their programs in a sustainable way. So with the intention of being able to continue to provide these services at these levels on an ongoing basis. So to that extent, it's certainly not a blip. I think they will actually, definitely what we will see in the next couple of years is that they will spend more than this. They will spend more than they're collecting in new tax revenue because they're spending down that carryover. That will be temporary because once that carryover is spent, it's gone, right? So they will continue to grow up to a certain point, and then they will not be able to maintain that level that they hit when they're spending carryover. They're going to have to bring it back down to a sustainable level. And that's really the challenge that they are faced with in these next couple of years. So, for example, they did a lot of expansion, specifically in Clackamas and Washington counties, as you commented on. Population B, they really served a lot. That's partly because they expanded rapid rehousing and eviction prevention because they had carryover. They had systems where they could increase that for a temporary period, help some people who needed it, but that they can't sustain it at that level because they're using carryover for that. So what we're going to see, I think, over the next few years is now that they've built this out, they're going to have to really look at what things are we keeping at these levels? What are we maybe going to pull back a little bit from? Where do we have some pilot programs that have been very successful and we're going to build them up? So I think from a total spending amount, you're going to see it go up a little bit more as they're spending carryover, and then it's going to come down once that carryover is spent, and it's going to sort of find a stable place. But within that number, exactly how they're spending it is still shifting around because this is still very new, and they're looking for what can we do that's the most efficient, that is going to really emphasize population A, right? Because as Yesenia said, that can be more challenging. So they want to build their programs to make sure that that is the population they're primarily serving. And so there's going to be some modification in their programming in order to meet the true goals of the program.
And for the 294 million spent, last fiscal year, do you have an estimate on spending for current fiscal year?
I don't have an estimate off the top of my head, but coming up very soon, we'll be doing a 5-year forecast for this program, and that's where we'll look at, and we, similar to last year, we'll probably break it into two pieces, which is like, what do we think is that ongoing stable amount that they'll be consistently spending through the end of this program, and what is the piece of carryover where they'll have this increase that will then come back down once that carryover is spent. So we'll be looking at that in the next couple months, and that'll come to you this fall in the 5-year forecast.
Great. And thank you for all the good work. Thank you.
Counselors, anyone else? My computer is not set up in a way this time that I can actually see. Okay, Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Councilor Huang asked the question that I did, and Councilor Lewis made reference to it. The question of the different balance between A and B, Multnomah County and the other two counties. I appreciate your answer. I still don't understand, as Councilor Lewis noted, tracking the money is very difficult, and I really do not understand how Multnomah County does what they do, or it seems to be a very convoluted thing. Fortunately, I don't have to worry too much about that. I'll leave that to some of the other counselors. My questions, so I appreciate the answer that it's a complicated issue. They have other funding sources, and it doesn't always match with the goals for those funding sources. Don't always match with how they spend the money from our funding source. So I understand, at least in general, that. But my question is twofold, or I have two questions. One is about the overall housing. Are we getting to a point where, well, first, I guess it really gets down to the question: what is the percentage of occupancy of the housing that we're building or that we are in process of building? In other words, do we have extra housing available if the counties continue to provide the services and get people into either rapid rehousing or long-term housing assistance, or are we running out of places to put them? And providing services where we have no housing. How close are we? Because I noticed the numbers of 4,300 is very close to the number of units that we will be building with the housing bond. That's one question. The other question is, where are we overall on supportive or shelters? Short-term shelters, we've made a lot of progress. We've built more shelters fairly quickly. Presumably, as we get people into permanent housing, as we have some success in this process, our need for shelters should at least level off, creating of new shelters. So where are we in that process? Do we have a great need for additional shelters, or are we sort of getting close to the kinds of short-term and medium-term shelters that we would anticipate needing on a long-term basis?
Yeah, those are both really great questions. So to speak a little to your first question around just building housing and housing opportunities. Supportive housing services, the funding at this point in time, actually housing isn't allowable, but we do leverage things like the Metro Housing Bond, other bonds, and other funding sources available, and partner as much as possible with the supportive housing services being able to come alongside these funding sources to provide those ongoing wraparound peer support that a household might need. I could definitely get back to you in terms of the Metro bond and how we're doing with those units and that connection and integration between the two funding sources. But I think overall, what I think we're hearing from the counties, from providers, is that there just isn't enough affordable housing, even with these housing projects that are coming online. The wait list very quickly fill up. So this is even before the construction has been finalized. There's already a list of households that need the services that they are going off of, getting them document ready, lease up ready. And then, X amount of households get placed, and then there's still hundreds of households in the queue needing that affordable housing. So I don't think we're at a point where we have affordable housing units that are just out there vacant. Like those are units that really get us leased up pretty quickly, and the need is still much higher than we have the resources for. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that pretty much answers the question. I know there's still projects that are coming online. Planbeck Gardens is going to come online in a couple months, perhaps. So we're still in the process of building them, but my assumption is that they're being filled because we provide the services, they're being filled as rapidly as we can get them built. Okay.
Yep.
The other question has to do with shelters. Do we reach a maximum need for shelters, and are we close to that?
Yeah, that's also a really great question. I mean, I think what's, anyone doing Housing 101 work knows that there's a continuum of services everywhere from outreach and shelter to permanent supportive housing, and there's multiple housing interventions there. I think what's unique about shelter is that we can only build in order to successfully transition folks out of shelter, we need to have those housing permanent options available. And overall, as a region, we still need more of that, which is why we've kind of have seen that even though we've been increasing shelters at an unprecedented rate, leveraging SHS dollars and other local funding sources in our community, because of the limited housing options, we're not seeing that transition from shelter into permanent housing as quickly as we would need to. Ideally, for the amount of shelters that we have in our system, we would need maybe 10 times the amount of affordable housing that we have to be able to to intentionally move households out of shelter into housing. So I don't really have a great answer to your question around have we reached the maximum capacity for shelter, because there are still folks currently experiencing homelessness that could leverage that shelter opportunity. But even if as they're transitioning into that, we're still finding that bottleneck because we don't have affordable housing for them to move into, which is just causing delays in the overall system of care.
Thank you. I think that answers the gist of my question.
Councilor Lewis, would it be okay if Councilor Gonzalez goes first and then come back to you? Okay, thanks.
Thank you both. Appreciate that. Excellent. So there's been such great questions. So I'm going to try and ask slightly different questions. But on something that Councilor Rosenthal was mentioning, talking about, something actually came to mind, and I wanted to ask. In terms of the data that's presented, specifically as it relates to shelter beds and the capacity. So I think we measure just in the number of beds that we support. Is there also data that we have that tracks like utilization of those beds? Are they full all the time? Is there like a metric of what we aim for? You know what I mean? Because like we could have 1,000 beds and they're all fully funded in there, but are they being used? Is that the right solution? I guess that's kind of what I'm getting to. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So at this point in time, yeah, the main data available that we have are the shelter beds that the counties are providing us via the quarterly and annual reports.
Okay.
I know that each county tracks things like people served, utilization rates in their own kind of data system and data sources. I think as we work to finalize data sharing agreements with the county, then we will have that level of data available for us to be able to do deeper analysis in terms of the impact that supportive housing services dollars are having when it comes to shelter. But at this point in time, we are quite limited with the data we have available, and we are doing some work with them to see what additional data we could get in these reports for this fiscal year.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm not necessarily advocating that we get all of the data. I mean, it'd be nice to see it. You know, I want to approach it from like what data will help the Metro Council understand the impact of our program and like what's measurable and those things, and then mostly what do we have the ability to try and influence or move. As long as good hearing that utilization data exists and that that it must be being used to make decisions on the ground level about capacity. So my other questions I wanted to ask were around the revenue and the spending. Two questions. The first one is just like a clarification or definition question. So under the report memo that you shared with us, under the spending tab, there's a phrase that I don't think I understand. So, like for example, it says Multnomah County spent 100%, 102% of its annual tax receipts. Can you just help me understand what that means?
Yep. So the Metro and the 3 counties all are collecting new revenue each year from the tax collections, and we have carryover from the prior year, right? So we both have 2 types of resources available to us, and for the most part are planning our budgets understanding that those are different resources. One is ongoing, the tax revenue will continue to come in. The carryover is for one-time things, because once we spend that down, then it's gone. What this is looking at is saying Multnomah County's total spending. So this includes their ongoing spending, the stuff that's going to happen forever, and their one-time investments, which were pretty significant this year.
Okay.
That's their total spending of $143 million. It is, just for the purposes of comparison, comparing it to the new revenue that came in, those tax collections.
Okay.
So just compared to those tax collections, they actually spent more than what they collected. They spent 102%. Yeah. Now that's fine because they have the carryover.
Yeah, of course.
And we knew a lot of their investments were that carryover. But that metric is in there just as a sort of a check to see like how is their spending comparing to that new revenue. And as I mentioned before, like they were all like fairly close to the amount of new revenue that was collected this year. Over the next couple of years, they will spend more than the revenue that comes in. So if we reported the same metric again, they're going to be at 120 or 130% because they're spending down that carryover. And then probably somewhere in year 6 or 7, we'll expect those numbers to even out once that carryover has been spent.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just asking to like even help to check my own understanding because there's so many different moving parts here. So on that same line of question, so I guess what I'm not fully understanding with that number is there's like a work plan that is generally agreed upon every fiscal year with each of the counties. And so this money is a combination of money from this fiscal year plus carryover from past years. Is that right?
What they spent,
Yes.
so everything they spent this fiscal year, the $143.5 million that they spent this fiscal year, was using 2 different resources.
Okay.
New current year revenue resources and carryover from prior year.
Okay, so I guess like one last question, and then I have one more question on revenue. But so, for example, with Multnomah County, and I'm just using Multnomah County as the example here. This applies to let's go to Washington County just to not pick on Multnomah County. So, for example, with Washington County, 93% spending, that doesn't necessarily tell us right now that 7% is the carryover. It might be a different makeup blend because of a combination of this fiscal year plus carryover. So in a lot of ways, it's like 2 building blocks are helping to measure one measurable for this fiscal year. Okay, great. Thank you for helping me understand that a little bit better because I'm trying to add up those things. And there's probably a question in the back of my mind around that I don't have quite yet, but I appreciate the clarification. So onto the revenue, which will be my last question for now. So we talk about how we had originally forecasted last fall that we would collect $356 million. We ended up collecting closer to $335 million. And so I'm wondering, how does it work when we have a shortfall with such a volatile measure? The counties have a work plan in their own forecast where, they have agreements, they have things that they're going to do. How do those things shift when the forecast does not come true? And so can you walk me to that and help me understand how that happens?
Completely. So you have all heard me and Josh and Brian Kennedy. Everyone has heard us describe this as a volatile revenue source. So because of that, there has to be some additional planning as the counties are putting together their budgets. And we try to be really clear with them when Metro, who prepares the forecast, is preparing it. We talk a lot about, this is what the forecast is, but here's some things that could impact this. Here's some things you need to be aware of. And we do updates throughout the year as if something's changing in the economy and that's going to impact the forecast, we let the counties know so that they have time to adjust their programming. That said, they also have a tax stabilization reserve. So when we looked at those carryover charts,
it's like a contingency rate, like a
but it's very much restricted to when actual revenue comes in below the forecast.
Okay.
So the difference between a contingency could be used when an opportunity comes up that you weren't expecting and you want to take advantage of that. They may have an opportunity, but they cannot use the tax stabilization reserve to go after that opportunity. They would have to use some other contingency to do that. That tax stabilization reserve is very specifically for when actual tax collections come in below the forecast. And it was set up that way because we know that that's going to happen, of course, over the life of this program. In the current year, so you're totally correct, we had forecasted $357 million. Actual collections were $335 million. That was about 6% below. That's going to be very normal. 6% below, 6% above, could be 7 or 8% below. Like, this is the range of normal for this tax. And they're large dollars, so it can feel significant.
Yeah.
But it is important for us as the administrators of this program and for the counties as the implementers of it to become used to that sort of fluctuation as normal. And it is also totally possible that actual collections could come in much below the forecast if we had a major economic event. And so that's why we do quarterly meetings with the CFOs at all the counties. We're constantly in communication with them about forecasts. We'll do another forecast as part of the 5-year forecast this fall. So we'll have a new number for FY25, the year that we're currently in. And it's just something that we need to be tracking very closely because it will swing up and down.
Thanks. I'll end my comments by just saying, similar to what other folks have mentioned, it's great to see really the spending accelerate so significantly in such a short amount of time, and the results clearly show that. And I just want to, obviously thank y'all for tracking the work as is our role as a oversight partner here. My line of questions are more so around clarification and not so much the spirit of trying to find anything wrong in per se with the implementation. So I appreciate it. Back to you, President.
Thank you. Counselors, before we go through another round, I just want to engage here. As you were walking through, and I know we're getting very close to the data sharing agreement, I'm starting to visualize in my head kind of the conversation that the region wants to have. And I think it's around the successes the counties are having, but we aren't able to yet articulate that for them and with them. And I think the numbers that we do have show number of beds established, number of households served, but we're not getting the full picture of how they came into the system, number of people contacted, number of people out of those contacts that came into the system, number of people that came into the system that were co-enrolled. I'm seeing a flow chart that looks similarly like the visitor development fund of these buckets, right? Sorry, Rachel. But it's more like how do we track not just through a year but through time, how long folks are staying in, once they get into the system for a shelter bed, are they getting moved out into permanent supportive housing? Are we losing them because they've been in there too long? Just these fundamental things of how we're serving the people, and not that the counties. I think they're doing that, but it's part of the conversation at the regional level to let everybody know how that's happening and where they're finding success and where they're still trying to figure out in the 3rd or 4th year of the measure, like how to catch those folks, how to move them on to the next level. What do they need? What are the resources that are needed? So I think that's where I'm going. It's not necessarily in this moment. I think we're making progress, and I'm very happy to see that. But it's kind of like that next phase of how are we seeing success through time? Because number of beds is number of beds. People served and people moved out, and finding success in their own lives is really, I think, what people are interested in. So look forward to that. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for letting me have one more question. When I think through the successes of the program and what is the most powerful tool, I still come back to the ARLA voucher. I just want to highlight the strength of our 2 smaller counties in using the ARLA voucher and the relative low number for Multnomah County. In particular, on the reporting chart, Multnomah County has dropped what the other 2 counties are reporting on, which is the number of people served with an ARLA voucher since July of 21. So I think that's something that in the future we want to bring up, is that total aggregate over time. How many households have we served? I bring this up because I think eventually I want to get to a point where there's a better understanding of all of the ARLA vouchers that are out there. I know some of them are getting baked into new affordable housing as it comes online to buy down rents, but the ones that are not attached to specific units in those kind of new opening situations, I want to get us to a point in which those vouchers are portable, which means we need all three counties operating in good faith with showing us what they've done and what they are continuing to do with those vouchers, who's housed with them, and eventually, as I said, the goal here is to have those vouchers port as people change jobs, change schools, and for any number of other valid reasons may want to move across a county boundary. So I'm just pointing out a little bit of a deficit in the report, but also someplace that I hope we can push further because it is the secret sauce to get people housed.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that really quickly, I completely agree. I think ARLAs are one of those invaluable resources that we've been able to create with this funding source. And I think as we head into year 4, we are looking at those year-to-date numbers and trying to better conceptualize how they are being leveraged and how we could really maximize the impact that they're having. So we have proposed to the counties this year in terms of the Metro's monitoring, for that to include ARLA and get a deeper dive into how are you utilizing it across the 3 counties and how effective is it being? What other learnings could we continue to learn and use as we continue to regionalize this program? And additionally, I know that on the TCPB side of things, this is also a discussion with the landlord recruitment and retention team. We have an ARLA work group that we work with really closely to continue to discuss portability. How do we really regionalize this really unique system of care that there's really nothing like it in the other resources that we have available. So thank you for those comments.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was really delighted to be at a ribbon cutting and be able to celebrate not only the new building, but the fact that we had attached some of the vouchers to some of those units. But then I look at total wrap-up number. We don't know how many of those are committed to specific places. It's fine, it's good, but we need to actually have some level of understanding about what in the future might be portable. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Second question. I said, Councilor Lewis just brought up an issue. A specific question is, what are the barriers to portability at this point in time? And maybe you can't answer that. But my other question was a little larger, and it's really an unfair question, is this is an election year, and there is the potential for having 2 very different economic models depending on the results of this election. Are we trying to figure out how that's going to affect the revenues from this, because the economy, or are we going to wait until after we see what the results of the election are? Is there any way to do that? I mean, like I said, this is sort of an unfair question. but the differences in potential economic outcomes are very strong in this case.
I appreciate you providing the caveat that it's an unfair question. I do kind of agree with that. What I can say is that we do know that it is an election year, and the economy really responds to an election year, right? Like, it's already, I mean, you may identify with this personally, or you may just be able to look at the stock market and see that, like, there's a tenseness, there's an uncertainty that is just going to increase up until that day, and we see what happens. We don't do projections specifically around outcomes because there's so many variables. If it's a landslide, if it's close, if it's contested, like, there's too much. But what we do know is that there's going to be an input on that day when people go and vote, and we will then watch for what happens after that and look for how that is going to, then once we can actually see what's happening after that, then we can take that into consideration in our forecast and how it may impact it. I felt Josh move closer, so I'm going to invite him up in case he wants to add anything else.
Sorry, I was trying to bail you out.
There's still time.
He was in the wings.
But you
ready.
didn't need it. You didn't need it. Thank you. Sorry. President Peterson, Councilor Rosenthal, Josh Harwood. I'm the Revenue and Analytics Division Director here at Metro, in charge of the forecasting for this. I will tell you that historically, we know around income taxes, there's a portion of the income taxes that are behavior related. So people can decide whether or not to realize certain capital gains or certain transactions in different tax years, and that can drive different outcomes. So this is a problem that is acute in a election year because of the dichotomy between the 2 candidates and the 2 economic models, as you mentioned. But this is an ongoing thing that we're going to be dealing with as it relates to federal tax law in general. So we know as it exists right now, the federal tax cuts that went in 2016 expire in 2025. There are probably going to be some actions around that will impact our tax collections. I don't know exactly what those are yet.
So it's a problem that we'll always have in an election year, particularly, but this year it may be on steroids.
Yeah, and so that'll be part of the conversation as we bring you the forecast in November and December around the new financial modeling, all these things. We'll try and bring that all as one piece rather than try and do this piecemeal thing like we've been doing a little bit.
Thanks.
But Rachel did great.
Okay.
We will miss her.
Seeing no other hands raised, just want to thank you for bringing this forward and continuing to do the great job. And looking forward to working with you in your new role, Rachel. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll move on, and we have next a presentation of performance measures audit results. I will call up our auditor, Brian Evans, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson and councilors. It's great to have the opportunity to present the results of an audit of Metro performance measures that was published earlier this month. David Beller, the senior management auditor who worked on this audit, is sick today, so wasn't able to present with me, so you just get me today. The purpose of this audit was to determine what was preventing Metro from complying with its financial policy to include performance measures in its annual budget. The audit's three objectives were to determine which of the Metro's commitments included performance measures, clear goals, and performance targets, to determine what progress was made since our 2014 audit of budget performance measures and what current barriers had limited their use, and also to determine what best practices could overcome any weaknesses or barriers that we might find in objectives 1 and 2. The audit found that Metro's approach to performance measures was fragmented. Several strategic frameworks and associated performance measures were created in the past, but they weren't sustained. One of the root causes we identified was that the mandate for performance measures was underdeveloped. As you know, and as you've been talking about in the previous presentations, performance measures are a critical component of the processes organizations use to achieve their objectives. Metro's financial policies require the annual budget to include performance measures, and many of our audits in recent years have focused on areas of improvement for performance measurement in various parts of Metro's programs and service areas. You may be familiar with the quote from Peter Drucker, the management expert, that what gets measured gets managed. And we think that performance measures, tracking progress towards goals, is a critical component of trust in government. The Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, has developed best practice guidance for performance measurement, and we use that criteria for this audit. Their guidance directs governments to identify, track, and communicate performance measures, both internally and externally. And it also identifies there are several different types of performance measures, including inputs, outputs, efficiency, quality, outcomes. Our analysis identified the goals and measures used by 8 departments and venues in the most recent documents that we could find, such as adopted budgets, department and venue annual reports, and program progress reports. For example, we used the 2030 Regional Waste Plan to identify solid waste goals and measures, and the bond levy resolutions for parks and nature. The analysis did not include the proposed measures that may be included in the fiscal year 24-25 budget. Those were finalized after the fieldwork for this audit was completed. At Metro, there appeared to be 3 levels of performance measures that were somewhat consistent over time. We found regional measures that kind of focused on agency-wide initiatives. We found budget measures that really focused on specific department and program goals. And then we found some operational measures that were sometimes used to evaluate the way that programs and services were delivered in a more detailed manner, so kind of below that department venue level. Each of these obviously provided different levels of detail and were probably relevant for different stakeholders. Overall, we found there was a need for a greater alignment between all 3 types of measures. During the audit, Metro's efforts were centered on the Strategic Targets initiative. Our analysis found that the 3 strategic targets did not encompass most programs and services at Metro. So about 1/3 of the goals, metrics, and targets in our sample were difficult to align with the strategic targets. GFOA GFOA recommends that performance measures be developed and used to monitor long-term plans and inform decision-making. These efforts should be based on program goals to maintain that internal alignment. The audit found Metro could use previous work on performance measures while making improvements over time to align with best practices. The 8 departments and venues we analyzed regularly tracked performance measures, so there was no shortage of data and things that had already been developed. But for some reason, they weren't included in the annual budgets from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 23-24, as required by the financial policy. The department and venue goals we reviewed were mostly clear, which showed improvement from our 2014 audit of the budget measures. However, some goals contain terms that were more vague or open to interpretation, which can make them more difficult to measure. While the goals were mostly clear, only around 40% included a performance measure associated with them. That suggests that progress was either not being measured or not being reported for about 60% of the goals that Metro had identified in our sample. Alignment of the goals and measures varied significantly among departments. So for one department, we found perfect alignment. Every goal had an associated measure. Other places we saw that only 6% of the goals had measures. So pretty wide range of tracking of goals and measures. Another area of improvement we saw was using performance targets to help interpret the data. In our sample, departments and venues rarely used a target, and which made it difficult for decision makers and members of the public to know if the efforts and the accomplishments were satisfactory. The audit also evaluated the types of measures that were used. Best practice literature recommends the use of a range of measures to provide a wide, full picture of performance. Most measures we reviewed were really focused on outputs. Outcomes, service quality, and efficiency were less frequently used. Finally, the audit identified opportunities to improve performance measure reporting. Metro's financial policy identifies the budget as the primary platform for reporting, but we found there were several other ways data was being reported. Some departments or venues, we were unable to find performance measure data in the last year, and for at least one organizational unit, the last update we could find was from fiscal year 2017-18. Establishing an expectation for timely and regular performance reporting could help strengthen accountability and transparency. The audit included 6 recommendations. 2 focused on refining Metro's financial policies to make greater use of best practices related to benchmarking, trend analysis, and reporting. And 4 recommendations were made to align department and venue practices with the financial policy and any associated guidance around performance measures. I want to thank the COO, DCOO, CFO, and all of the employees who helped us during this audit. And I'd like to thank David for his work as well. Happy to answer any questions you might have now or wait till you hear the management response.
Okay, why don't we do management response? Thank you, Auditor.
Call Andrew Scott, COO, to give a management response.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good morning, I'm Andrew Scott, IT and front end of the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and I'm joined today by Dave McFord, who some of you may have met, maybe not. She's Metro's Performance Data and Policy Manager. So just briefly, I want to thank the manager. Thank the auditor for this audit. Management agrees with the audit's findings and recommendations, many of which are already in progress, and we're going to walk through a little bit of that today. I do want to take just a moment to provide a little bit of historical background in terms of how we got to where we are today. So I arrived at Metro in 2018. And in late 2018, we made the decision to pause our budget performance measures, our management reports, and the balanced scorecard we were doing at the time because, just to be frank, as practiced, at that time, they weren't adding much value to our organization. And it was one of the things when I got here and I did a lot of interviews and talked to people, I read actually some of the auditors' prior audits, and we really determined that there was a lack of value there. And so we stopped doing those reports, and we spent time in 2019 reworking what it is that council and our departments really wanted to see in a performance management system. The plan was to put that in place very quickly. As you know, the pandemic put a lot of those plans on hold, and we really shifted a lot of our work internally to some more urgent and pressing needs.
But we have had it on our list to sort of get back to. And one of the things that actually has been really helpful is Council's adoption of the strategic targets last December. Really gave us sort of that opportunity to say, okay, we now have a new guiding vision from our council, and it's time to relaunch that centralized performance management efforts. It's one of the reasons why Jane Marie has joined Metro. And our departments and venues were asked as part of this 24-25 budget development process to identify 2 to 3 performance measures that capture the work that's already happening within Metro to make progress against those strategic targets. And in our budget development for this upcoming cycle, we're focused on really fully implementing a new performance framework that's going to really help operationalize some of those regional priorities. It's going to help demonstrate the accountability and transparency and establish a robust process for evaluating the work. The things that the auditor's pointing out are missing currently, which we do agree with. So just to, I won't go through each recommendation specifically, but to talk a little bit about the responses to those recommendations. As I noted at the start, we do agree overall, and our specific responses are laid out in the manager response. But at that high level, we have included these performance measures for each budget, each department and venue in the current adopted budget, and also in a new online dashboard, which Jane Marie is going to walk you through in just a moment. It'll be the first time I think that council has seen this. And we are trying to include up to 5 years of historical data where it's available. Not all of our measures have that data, and some of the measures are new, but we are including that data where it's available. And we're really working with department leadership right now to refine the suite of performance measures that each department has and really build those up over the next few years. As I mentioned, those performance measures we were reporting in prior budgets were they were pretty ineffective. They and I don't want to say across the board, there may have been some useful ones, but a lot of them, it was more of an exercise in just reporting and not an exercise in actually finding what it is that we need to be measuring to be more effective as an organization. So we really want to make sure that we are tracking different types of measures that provide a holistic view of our work. Again, the audit points out those different measures at different layers of the organization are really important. We do want to make sure we're setting targets and benchmarks to help provide context for all those results and trends over time. That's something organizations generally struggle with, but it's one of the key factors in any performance management system. You can talk about what you're measuring, but if you don't talk about where you want to go or how far you want to go, it's hard to gauge success and hold yourselves accountable to it. And we really want to turn that information into something that's actionable from a programmatic, a policy, and an operational perspective for the organization. So it's not just reporting measures that get reported every year, but it's actually tracking things that at the COO's level, at the department level, even at the line level, can really help drive some of those key decisions. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, we are planning to engage with council very soon to develop regional indicators that are going to help measure progress against those strategic goals that you've set for the organization. And so these are population level metrics. These are things like greenhouse gas emissions, housing production rates, regional job growth. They're measures that are really, really important to the region. They aren't measures that Metro necessarily has a direct impact on or that we can necessarily move the needle on, but they are things that you've indicated to us, and I think that the region would generally agree, we want to make sure we're making progress against those. And so I'll come back to this a little bit at the end after we show the dashboard, but we really are trying in this performance management system to talk about what are those regional indicators that we're tracking, but maybe Metro doesn't play a direct role in. What are the programs and policies that we play a very direct role in that actually can impact those strategic targets as well? And then what are the operational measures that we want to be tracking at a department level that help us just be better in terms of providing the services we're providing? Jane Marie, you want to give a preview of the dashboard?
Sure. Jane Marie Ford, she, her Revenue Analytics Division. I think we're going to bring up.
Yep, there you go.
I'm not seeing. Testing.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. I'll try again. Hi, Jane Marie Ford, she, her Revenue Analytics Division. Thanks for having me today. I think we're going to bring up the dashboard. We'll wait just a second until that's on the screen. And this is still in draft. The departments and venues have reviewed it because we used it to help create graphics for adopted budget, but this will be available to you all, and appreciate any feedback and insights you have on this. This is our landing page. It provides the framework of the strategic targets for our overall performance at Metro. We also added support and logistics because we wanted to capture all the programs and operations that help support all of the other work that we do. If you click through on the bottom link, it's going to take you to a landing page for the individual departments. And so you can click through for each. We're going to go over to the top right to Waste Prevention and Environmental Services. And we can see here what the measures that they selected for this year. WPES is a great example. They have already been tracking robust performance measures that are tied to their plans. We picked 3 for this year. You can see on the left as an example, and you don't need to click through it, but I'm having fun playing around with different types of graphics and ways to display information. And on the left side, you can actually drill down and look by different demographics to see the median wage of solid waste workers. And so we're going to try to incorporate that as much as possible as we move forward. WPES already has some plans for their next round of performance measures to add to this. So over time, we're going to expand this to have a few more measures and some more analysis and information that will hopefully be helpful to the public and to decision makers. If you don't mind, Andrew thought we should show one more, a topical dashboard. If we can go back to the department landing page, if you don't mind. I know I didn't tell you this ahead of time. Thank you. Perfect. I click through there, and then we can go to housing since we were talking about that. It's the top middle. So here's another example, and these are measures that are already tied to the big initiatives that housing is doing. You can see as an example at the bottom here, there's a little bit more narrative and some links to the other to their websites. And so this again, draft starting point, but over time, what we've been really focusing on this year is trying to really document what measures we have, what they're tied to, where we want to go, and trying to create more of that centralized, robust inventory that we can expand over time and start moving forward into more of the so what and the analysis and process improvement across the organization. So thank you.
And I will just sort of add to this. This is very much a work in progress, and it's very much draft. And so, again, and it also is not necessarily static. And so, one of the things I know there's lots of conversations right now around housing and what we should be tracking. And one of the beauties of having a really robust performance management system, once we sort of build the whole thing out, is we can be tracking all kinds of metrics, and then we can choose which ones that we want to highlight on a dashboard. We can choose which ones we want to provide to you all in reports as often as you want to get them, whether it's once a year, once a quarter. We can be talking about those at a regional level as well. And so lots of work still to go in this. Nothing here is finalized, but as we've moved, government's generally moving into more data visualizations. I'm excited that we can be able to do that as well. I think it brings a different perspective to some of this data. So I'll summarize by just saying I'm excited about the progress that we're making around performance management. It has been delayed, and I think that I'm glad we're going to be able to get some of these things back up and running. And, you know, the ultimate vision we have is for a system that connects everything up to those strategic targets set by council. That includes the regional indicators that measure our progress on big population level challenges, performance measures that show the impact of our metro-specific programs on strategic targets, operational metrics, as I mentioned, that provide that information to department leadership to help them make effective program and resource decisions. And then last but certainly not least, woven through all of this conversation is our continued strong emphasis on equity measures that are going to disaggregate the data in a way that allows us to understand the potentially disparate impact on different communities and adjust our approach accordingly. So not necessarily every single measure, but as many as we can. When you see an aggregated measure, we'll also have disaggregated data that below that'll really tell us either by population or by community, by neighborhood, whatever level we can get down to some of those impacts. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Counselors, questions for the auditor and or management? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the audit, and Junior in particular, thank you for giving us a preview to the dashboard. I think that is something we have been hungry for like a year, and we've heard that it's happening, and now to get to see it is wonderful. I wanted to, I guess, kind of directly respond, hearing management lay out the timeline, but not directly kind of combat. I just want to say it a little bit more clear that we adopted strategic targets in December. Budget process was already months underway at that point. So if one of the largest critiques in the audit is that more than half of the strategic target don't correspond, I feel like that is not a useful measure in this year. I feel like it's going to be a more useful measure next year because we had initially said we were going to get this done in August, but then we heard from community we need loud and obvious ways for community to give input. We held 15, 20 charrettes. So that's why we adopted in December. So I guess my question is, will you be looking at next year's number, because that's, I think, the more accurate judge of have our strategic targets taken hold, or is this kind of a one and done audit look for you?
Thanks for the question, Council Lewis. I think you're aware, but I'll repeat for the sake of the audience. Every year I decide what audits to try to follow up on. I talk to all of you. I talk to the rest of the management team, ask the public if they have interest in certain areas. So don't want to prejudge where we would go next year in terms of when it would be a good time to follow up and see how well that alignment is going, how that implementation of the strategic targets is kind of filtering through the existing performance or the new performance measure system. So when I come and meet with you all in May, if you have a strong preference to see that metric revised, happy to do it. I think part of the reason we're bringing up that metric in this audit is not necessarily to say that it should be more or less at any given moment in time, but to really think about how likely it is that we'll be able to get all of those things aligned under the same strategic targets, right? So if you saw on the slide in the management response, I think you saw your 3 strategic targets and then you saw another right at that bottom. And so I think what we're really talking about is that other. Is the expectation that we're not going to measure those others, or that they're going to be strategic targets, or in the budget, which one? Is it going to be only report on your strategic targets and everybody that doesn't have a strategic target don't report? I think that level of clarity is what I have seen over time in this organization, is that there's clarity maybe at different levels about where those things align, but operationally from a department director or from a venue director, from a division director, where do we fit in and what is the expectation? If we're asking to be providing performance measures in 20 categories, that seems overwhelming in a checkbox. If we're trying to stay centered and consistent from year to year, then I think it's easier to start to get organizational buy-in and start to see where the value add from doing the measurement is. And so I think it really goes to that consistency. So to the extent that asking the same questions in the budget cycle each year, then I could imagine you would see corresponding alignment over time to get more and more consistent.
Thank you. I was not trying to urge you to pick this again next year. We can have that conversation. I'm just saying that in future years, it'll be of more interest to me in terms of, are we getting the numbers that we need? Because this year it was midstream, and I don't fault folks who had begun a process without that direction for not changing course on a dime in the middle of budget season.
So there appears to be an interest in the entire council in weighing in. So I'm just going to go down the line. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Auditor Evans. As usual, I think your audits bring up some important points, and I also want to appreciate staff that we seem to say this is an important thing that we need to deal with, and the response seems to be proactive and appropriate. There's a lot of work to be done. It's sort of complicated. Each division, each department has sort of a different process and different goals and different performance measures, so it's going to be complicated, and I appreciate the fact that we're moving forward with the dashboard. 2 questions come to mind. First of all, is there a magic formula for we can avoid as you said previously, we had performance audits and it really wasn't adding anything to the overall performance because for some reason they were, I don't know, too general or too vague or whatever. Is there a magic secret for tightening that up, making them more effective? And then secondly, do we have a means of communicating? I mean, I think we're serious about having performance audits and targets that actually mean something, that improve the performance and make sure that we're keeping track of how we're doing for the region and the communities. Do we have a way of communicating this with particularly the entities that probably are most likely to, shall we say, not support us in some regard, which would be a lot of our partner agencies? In other words, I think it's important that they understand that we are trying to do performance audits in a proactive way, whether it's all the cities and the counties, and I don't think they always realize this. They don't always realize that this is an important part of the communication of the regional kind of glue that we try and provide for the region. So, do we have a way of sort of sharing this dashboard with city councils and county commissions so they know what's going on, so they have at least an awareness of the fact that we take this seriously?
Is that directed at me?
Whoever wants to answer.
I'll try my best, then I'll hand it over. Councilor Rosenthal, I think in terms of the magic formula, I guess my perspective would be the magic formula is practice and refine over time, right? So I guess when I think about performance measures, I think of the saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think in this agency, there's plenty of capacity and really skilled and knowledgeable folks, both from a data analytics, from management, from a continuation over time of programs and services. And so part of the reason that this audit landed on the schedule this year is partly because of the fear of trying to reinvent that wheel and thinking that there's going to be a perfect solution. And I think what we're trying to drive home in this messaging in this audit is really there's a lot of good quality work that you could draw from, and let's not let the word choice get in the way of tapping into something that's already available to you all to use right now. And I don't know if management agrees, but I get the sense that some of the results in the dashboard that you see right now are part of that is realizing that there is something to tap into already, and that maybe restarting that process that ended a couple of years ago is worth the effort, and there's something there to draw from initially. For your second question around communication with partners, I guess I definitely see that partner value there. I tend to think things in terms of the value to the public and then value to the folks making decisions, right? Resource decisions, whether it's at the council level or when folks put together their budgets for the year. To me, the performance measures have the most value there. It's like, tell us what you're trying to do. Tell us where you're doing it. Do you need more reasons to get there? Do you need to change to get there? And so it's really that question and answer during the resource allocation process that, to my mind, has the biggest value.
Yeah, I don't think I have much more to add. The auditor covered that really well. The only thing maybe on the communication is just, again, maybe differentiating a little bit. We, through our dashboard is how we are transparent about our own measures and what we're doing. I do think there's going to be, the conversation we're going to be having with you all is around those regional indicators. And I think that's, we can tell the rest of the region what we're trying to do as a government, what we need to be careful about is talking to the rest of the region about what do we want to look at for those regional indicators, and honestly that's probably more of a council to council conversation than staff to staff conversation. And so I think figuring out what are those things that we want to measure, and how do we get sort of broad agreement, and where can we pull on things that already exist, right? There are already greenhouse gas emission goals for the region, and so I think we can pull on those as well. But no, I think the auditor said it really well. One of the reasons you do this is to be transparent about what you're trying to do so that you have that accountability around whether you've achieved it or not.
All right. Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson, and thank you, Auditor Evans and staff for being here to host a conversation about it. I was looking through the, I think it's the actual audit report file, and there was a section that appealed to me, and I wanted to, bring it up for discussion. And it's the section called "Several Strategic Frameworks Were Created," and there's a specific line here that we heard that leadership had a similar challenge when they attempted to measure progress on some of the prior organizational frameworks. And this is what really stood out to me from the auditor's report. For example, the 6 desired outcomes adopted by Council in 2010 included outcomes like vibrant communities, which made it difficult to know what to measure. So I bring that up for example because that's like a 14-year-old item. And as and I think this is a policy question too for us as a council, President. I don't know how we work on this, but as our councils change and evolve and as new things get layered on, do we need to have formal action? And I'm not saying we need to decommission the 6 desired. That's not what I'm saying. But it brought up a question to me.
Oh. No. I think we'd all agree that that is the desired outcome, is to move in a new direction. So go ahead.
Yeah, we want to move in a new direction, but as you know, as new councils and new priorities emerge, do we have does a new policy override form? Do we need to formally decommission old frameworks? Because I mean, this line in particular just brought up so much questions and feeling like, you know what? Yes, a council in 2010 did approve that and adopt that, and that is, I think that still informs so much of the work that Metro does. I think that we have policies probably individually on each of those outcomes that is now, but I think it's still a good point to have a conversation around. So what I feel here is this highlights to me in terms of performance measurements and strategic goals with different frameworks, how you measure them. It's almost like the goalpost keeps not, I don't want to say moving, but shifting to adjust to the needs of the moment. And so just bringing it up as a question, at what point should the council, when we're introducing new things, also talk about what is this replacing formally, overriding, adjusting, appendix of XYZ, and really that's my comment. Don't know if y'all have any thoughts on that per se, but I'm just posing it as a policy question, and look forward to hearing everyone else's comments.
I think the CIO is ready to weigh in on that.
Thank you. I love that this came up because I do think that it's a yes and yes. I think we do need to retire frameworks and things when we feel that they are stale or when they're starting to stack on, because it is incredibly confusing for the organization to have multiple, frameworks or things, because remember, there's not just the enterprise-wide frameworks. Departments often have their, individual strategic plans or frameworks that they're working with. So, achieving that clarity. At the same time, though, new frameworks, new things, it's not an effortless, activity. It takes a lot of institutional effort to bring these things to fruition. And I think, there are some, if done well, performance measures can drive decisions, can do wonderful things. If done poorly, if frameworks are done poorly, if it becomes very expensive busy work that isn't adding to the organization's effectiveness. So I think there has to be, an intentional process, a culling, a letting go, and then also being really clear on, is the purpose of this work to check the box and say we have performance measures, or is it to actually drive better outcomes, drive decisions? And I'll just, since the mic's on now, it's gratitude to you, auditor, and your team for bringing this up, as well as to Andrew and Jane Marie for the work that they've done, because I do feel that we are on a better track to being on the side of being better because of it.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I might just, I agree with the things that Marisa said, and also just a very tangible example to kind of connect up this long-term history that I think you're referring to in your current strategic target around climate and resiliency. I think you have the word sustainable in that, and if you go all the way back to 2008, the Metro Council at that time said sustainability will be the guiding principle for everything that Metro does, and so there was 5 goals associated with that statement, and so one route would be take those goals, move them forward, put them under the strategic target for climate resiliency. If you have a different opinion about what that goal is now in the current context, then sunsetting those old goals probably would be helpful to provide a clarity. So just a very practical, hands-on example of how that can play out in the real world.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wong.
Yep. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Auditor Evans and the staff for all the work. I have a love-hate relationship is the right word for dashboards. But I want to just kind of reinforce the kind of priorities that we have at Metro, where we really center equity, and it's called out here in the keeping our promises and build back better. Like racial equity is really centered, and when we just like distill it down to numbers and dashboards, I don't think we're able to tell that full story, and whether it be racial equity or economic justice or whatnot, like there's just so many places where we have competing values that we're trying to get to multiple outcomes. So it's like we could source from a global corporate conglomerate, or we can buy local. But if we buy local, that has ramifications on our numbers. Or we are really supportive of NWSB businesses, but that also might impact our bottom line. But we're achieving other outcomes that we've set forward as priorities. So I just wanted to caution against having just the numbers and benchmarks kind of guide all our resource allocation, because we do have other outcomes that we're seeking, and maybe in the dashboard there could be some more nuance to some of the categories and numbers, where it's like we're measuring you know tons of garbage, not in the landfill or something, but we're not maximizing that number because we are also considering these other outcomes. So I just wanted to be sure that we're telling that full story, and that a lot of times equity work is expensive or can cost more, but it leads to the outcomes that we want to see in future years. So we're making an investment on that, and that if we're just all about dollars and cents, kind of leave equity to the sideline. So I don't know if we can just tell a more complete story in that dashboard about all the considerations that we have taken. Thanks.
It's a great. Thank you. Thank you for that point. It's something that we do take very seriously in terms of the numbers tell a part of the story. The qualitative data tells another part of the story, and the full sort of narrative is intended to complete that. And I think you're right. It's one of the dangers of dashboards is oversimplification. So it's a great point.
Okay. Councilor Nolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for bringing it up. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I appreciate the movement toward implementation. I really think that, as you pointed out, Mr. Scott, that the council should wrestle with what the region looks like because of actions that Metro takes. And the executive part of our operation, the departments, the COO's office, should focus on how we get there, with some back and forth about, well, if you want that, here are changes we need to make, maybe in our code, maybe even in our charter, certainly in our staffing, certainly in our budget. So I'm interested in moving as quickly as we can to the council really wrestling with how do our competing values play out in this to give the COO and the departments better guidance. And I think we need to recognize that how we aspire for the region to look and be experienced by the people who live and work here will include things that Metro doesn't have direct control of. But in a mathematical, logical way of looking at it, Metro's authority and actions may not be enough or sufficient to deliver those outcomes, but we should identify the steps that we can take that are necessary for that outcome to be realized, and recognize that other players, the economy, the private sector, our local government partners can influence it. And it's not a perfect analogy, but I think of it a little bit like
um, a team saying, we want to win the league championship. That's a council level aspiration. And what the coaches and the players do to get from, maybe we have a losing record now. And what does it take to get to winning the championship? How much time, how much money needs to be invested, how much personnel, how many personnel changes need to happen, those kinds of things. It's an oversimplified analogy, but there are some things that the team has to do or the goal will never be achieved. And there's a world out there because there are other teams also aspiring for the same goal, and only one team wins the championship every year. So we can't control who is on the field against us every week. But that kind of thinking. And Madam Chair, I'm really interested in conversations here that acknowledge that, as Councilor Wong pointed out, put on the table some competition between our aspirations and kind of force us to sort those out in specific enough results that we can't check the box no matter what we do. When we write generic goals a year from now, 3 years from now, a lot of them can be checked as, yep, we got there, no matter what we did. It's hard work, but I think you can guide us through that conversation.
Top of mind is increasing access to parks, right? What does that actually mean? And I know our Parks Department is working on it, so very, very much agree. Any other last comments? Well, Auditor, thank you. This is of deep importance to me personally, but I think our council did a great job pointing out all of the things that we value moving forward and the work, what you did to point out some of the places where we can do better. And I'm just glad we're moving forward in getting back to where we were pre-pandemic. And that is really focusing on the long term, how we achieve these goals, and not just the emergency crisis. So it feels good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks you.
Thank you.
All right, counselors, we'll move on to Chief Operating Officer Communication.
Thank you, Council President Peterson. Have a couple things today. I wanted to take a short moment to brag on our Oregon Zoo team. Our wonderful zoo director, Heidi Ron, is in Calgary this week for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums annual conference. The zoo received recognition at the conference for their 50 years of AZA accreditation, an accomplishment that is a testament to the long-term commitment and care that our zoo team brings to their work. They were also surprised, I think you may have this in your emails, but just to brag on them publicly, with another accolade yesterday and received the Excellence in Marketing Award for the Together for Wildlife rebrand and the, quote, Come for the Wonder, Stay for the Wild ad campaign. Zoo staff and leadership are also participating in and leading panels on diversity in hiring, teen programs, tribal engagement, apprenticeships, congressional earmarks, and animal health. I'm sure that we'll get the full scoop when the team returns, but I couldn't resist giving you all a little sneak peek. I also just wanted to remind folks that many folks from Metro will be in Wood Village this afternoon from 4 to 6 for another Metro Mixer. The City of Wood Village has graciously agreed to co-host us at the Wood Village City Hall and Civic Center. Councillor Simpson is unable to attend, but Councillor Rosenthal and President Peterson will be there to represent Metro Council. Thank you very much. These events are a great way to connect with folks around the region and have been invaluable networking opportunities. So I'm looking forward to being there. And then lastly, I wanted to put in a plug for the Star Party being hosted by Parks and Nature on Friday, September 27th at Glendoveer Golf Course from 6:30 to 8:30. Hopefully the weather will cooperate, but if you have kids or even adults who got excited about the Aurora Borealis we saw earlier this year and want to learn more about the night sky, this is a great opportunity to learn from OMSI staff and the Rose City astronomers while enjoying some snacks and hot cocoa. There's no registration required, but more information is available at oregonmetro.gov/guided activities. That's all I have.
Thank you. Exciting. Good stuff. And kudos yet again to the zoo team for all their hard work. Counselor Communication.
Well, I was just going to say that for the it's Hispanic Awareness Month, and there was a great Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber event this last Saturday night, Friday night. It was Councilor Gonzalez was there. It was quite a lively and well attended event. It's really quite a great community and has a lot of representation and a lot of activity. That's one thing. I also want to say, this is from a personal standpoint, had an opportunity to tour the Kellogg Creek area, which is probably going to come before us as a large-scale community visions. It's important to me because I've worked on Fannel Creek and Crystal Springs Creek and Johnson Creek in terms of habitat protection, and Kellogg Creek is the third major tributary stream in that upreach area that's going to provide greater opportunities for salmon smolts as well as adults, juveniles, open up a bunch of habitat. I hope it moves forward. It seems like there's a lot of enthusiasm on the part of both Milwaukee and the North Clackamas Parks District. That's a really great thing. And then everybody knows that the whole city is somewhat giddy with the WNBA announcement yesterday.
For sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Council Rosenthal. Yes, it's the Tuesday celebration for Latina Heritage Month here at Metro. I want to give a lot of gratitude to the Metro staff that also work to support our affinity groups and our employee resource groups to create spaces that elevate the contributions of the diversity of the staff and of the people in our region. So that was really special. And so just I know there was an organizing committee and want to applaud their work. The one thing additionally to that I wanted to bring up was that last week, Council Rosenthal and I also we co-chaired the last iteration of the TV Highway Steering Committee meeting, and essentially we walked through a few things, public engagement being one of them. And right now there is a virtual open house open for a pretty important stage of I guess what we're calling the pre-LPA process in terms of station refinement, corridor refinement, and really a big effort of community engagement. So highly encourage folks to please go and give feedback to the incredible work that our planning staff has done, but also our data team and creating a GIS tool that is super cool. So please go look at that. And I don't know the exact website, but just Google TV Highway Metro and it'll take you to the page and there's a survey link. Thanks.
Any other communications? Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Council President Peterson, you may actually fill this in more, but just wanted to thank Intertwine and partners for the policymaker bike ride on Friday. A really good group of folks with their wheels and good discussion about how all the different layers of funding have to come together to make these projects a reality.
Oh, and we had JPAC this morning too. Yep, I almost forgot about that. It was an early morning. We talked a great deal. We had the chief safety officer from TriMet come through. We spent probably 50 to 60% of our time of the meeting going into all of the ways that TriMet is working to improve safety, security, cleanliness, and collaboration throughout the entire region. We've added agenda items and trying to build new traditions within the JPAC meeting to really highlight the importance of transit and ridership and what we can all do to help that recover from COVID. So that was great. And then we made significant progress in the setting of our regional priorities for the upcoming legislative session, and we'll have an action in October for JPAC to approve. So that's pretty great. Thank you to all the staff that showed up at 7 a.m. Appreciate y'all.
We should do those online more often.
Yeah. Georgia, I see you. Thank you.
I normally don't have much to share, but I want to acknowledge that I feel like I'm at Rotary with brags and boasts, and I should put $10 on the table. But was awarded the Heavy Hitter Award by the Albina Vision Trust this weekend. Was that this weekend? Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday dinner.
And it meant a lot in terms of moving a huge agenda for the region forward. And obviously, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of team members, including this council and our staff, who at the time were led by Margie Bradway, who really was a force to help move that initial work forward with $295,000 seed grant. It seems so tiny now that they have brought in, if you add in the cap to ODOT federal money, they've brought in $515 million to the Rose Quarter area, Lower Albina, and are just, on a roll. So,
Can
yeah.
we dashboard that? I'm just kidding.
Awards.
No, the 250 seed grant to the 550
Yes,
million.
exactly. Along with the $5 million that we put in for the large scale community grants, to be able to help purchase property in parks for that area as well. So all of these things are becoming extremely cumulative. And the intent that we put into that and the intent that we're putting into other areas of the region is just, again, part of what I consider is going to need to be talked about with our future vision of how we are really moving in two parallel tracks, still staying on centers and corridors, but we have a whole new overlay of things that need to be included in that future vision. So it's very exciting, and I'm glad to see both happening.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. With that, anything else for the good of the order? All right, we are adjourned, and our next meeting is Tuesday, September 24th. See you there.